Namaste and welcome to Detours with me, Anuradha Goyal, where I talk to some very interesting personalities about journeys of all kinds. As you know, I write a lot about temples. I love visiting them. So today I thought I'll invite a guest who is an expert at interpreting temples, at introducing us to the aspects of temples that we usually tend to miss. We have Sri Ramakrishna Kongalla ji with us, who is by profession an academician in the tourism space. But if you follow his Twitter handle, his Instagram handle, you would see how intimately he knows the temples and how well he acts as a bridge between the world of scholars who study temples and the layperson who actually visits them to pray. So, Ramakrishna ji, welcome to Detours.
Namaste, ma'am. Thanks a lot for the introduction.
So Ramakrishna ji, let's start talking about a topic both of us are passionate about, temples. Today, let's talk about how to visit a temple. You know, most of us, we go there, we stand in front of the deity for a few seconds or few minutes, and we come out, and that's visiting the temple. Sometimes we stand and admire the architecture of ancient temples. But walk us through how we should visit a temple, and let's start with which is the most important thing in the temple that we must spend some time at.
Yes. Ma'am, with your permission, before starting this discussion, there is this very beautiful shloka from Jabala Upanishad.
Ji.
So, just I would say, and this is very important in this discussion. And after
Please,
I read out the shloka, you will understand why it is so important.
Please.
There is this shloka which goes as Shivam Atmani Pashyanti Pratimasuna Yoginaha Agnanam Bhavanardhaya Pratima Parikalpita. It says, like yogis and sadhus, they have Shiva in their heart, so they need not go to visit a murti in the temple.
Okay.
Whereas we normal people, we are ignorant.
Right.
We are filled with agnana, and it is for normal people like us with agnana who is supposed to go to a temple and visit a murti. So this concept very clearly is explained already in Hinduism, saying that because again this concept comes from the West, idol worship and murti worship, and then writing negative things about it. But it is already said in the literature of Sanatana Dharma itself, saying that the sadhus and yogis, they don't need to go. So we have to understand, like before going to the temple, we have to understand this basic fact that we are ignorant people. We do not know much, and with lot of curiosity to understand the things, we have to go to temple.
Right.
Very clearly stated in our own this Jabala Upanishad. That is one thing. And next, coming to the point, what you said, what are the basic things that we have to focus when we go to a temple or visit a temple? Are the two things. One is the Garbhagriha, and next to the mandapa. So when you enter a temple, the Garbhagriha is where the Mula Murti is, or Mula Nayaka we call, or the chief deity. And it's a closed chamber. Garbhagriha is a closed chamber, and it contains a lot of energy. The concept of energy in Garbhagriha itself is again a different topic. But then, so when you are visiting a temple, what we have to do is just before the both sides of the Garbhagriha or the Dwara of Garbhagriha, we have observed, or we have seen people standing in a line. So why do they do so? Because the energy that is radiated in the Garbhagriha can be absorbed by us. Right. That is one thing. So generally, because we are not aware of this energy that is being radiated from the Murti and the Garbhagriha, we do not, because maybe we think it is fashion, or because we do not want to stand along with many people there near Garbhagriha, we tend to neglect that aspect. And next, after standing near this Garbhagriha and having darshana of the chief deity or Mula Murti, what we have to do is we have to spend some time in sitting in the mandapa that is there close by. Okay, that is there, just there before the Garbhagriha.
Mm-hmm.
And generally because it is already said at least you should spend some 5-10 minutes sitting in the mandapa. Generally what do they do is it has become a fashion that they touch the floor of the mandapa with the hand and they come out. So in a sense when you are doing so, not paying attention to the garbhagriha or sitting in the mandapa, you are not fulfilling that aspect of visiting the temple, the motto of visiting the temple. So why should you sit in that mandapa is because with a lot of Vedic mantras, with a lot of archana, arti, and all these aspects, ritualistic aspects, what the place itself has got a psychological aura in it,
Right.
which can bring some positive energy and positive feeling in us. For example, the incense sticks that we light in home itself is a very good example of how positive energy that brings in us.
Right.
So you have to spend at least 5-10 minutes sitting in the mandapa so that you have that lot of positivity and also observe the energy that is there in the Garbhagriha and mandapa. These are the two aspects we have to focus a lot.
Yeah, I also think that when we go and pray there or chant there, we also add to that energy.
Yes, exactly. Yes, and this also, and another important aspect, because let me say this point also, like we do not pay attention to, but then as soon as we get into the temple, we have to make sure that we stand below the bell of the temple. That is very most of the people they neglect, because the bell that is there in the temple ganta is a panchadhatu made of panchadhatu loha. Okay. And then when these panchadhatus are used, okay, it has got a special vibration which can influence the kundalini in our body. So that is again, whenever you stand exactly below the bell and you ring it, there is a number of rings that we have to give. There are 8, 16, 32, 64, but then we will not get into the aspects of numbers. But then this much, when you are doing it, the vibration will always remind you that you have to pay focus on the Murti and Garbhagriha and not anything else.
Okay. So in the Garbhagriha, we pray and then we take charanamrit or tirtha, as you call it in South India.
Yes.
And what's the significance of that, if you can speak for half a minute on that?
Yes, after visiting Garbhagriha Moolamurti and sitting in the mandapa and then standing below the bell and then ringing it, then the next aspect is the Prasadam and the Panchamrit or Charanamrit that we take. So the Panchamrit and Charanamrit are very tricky terminologies. We will talk about that. But then Prasadam, it is also said, because on Toli Ekadashi we conduct this Satyanarayana Swami Vrata. So there are 5 stories we read when we organize this Satyanarayana Swami Vrata, and it is very clearly mentioned there, okay, in those stories, that if you are coming or if you are coming out of the temple or Vrata without receiving the prasadam, then it is not a good omen.
So it's not a complete visit if you don't take prasad.
It's not a complete visit. The reason is the prasada itself is made of different nutritious grains. Right. And it is actually an extra nutritious supplement to human beings. That is one thing. And when it comes to this charanamrit or panchamrit contains 5 elements. Right. Okay, like the cow milk, curd, ghee, honey, water, etc. And then it is also called charanamrit. It is called charanamrit when a snapana, in the sense bathing, is done to a murti which is outside the Garbhagriha.
Right.
So basically there are 2 murtis in a temple. One is the Mula Murti, which is immovable, that doesn't move. And one is the same replica of Mula Murti outside the Garbhagriha, which we can visit, we can touch, which is called as Utsava Murti, which is also taken outside during the festivals.
Right.
So that bathing is, with this Panchamrita, the bathing is done to the Murti. And again, this Murti is also made of Panchadhatu.
Right.
So, so when that bathing is done to the murti, what happens is all these five elements they come from the feet of the murti, and that is the reason it is called as charanamrit. So,
Right.
and then when this snapana is done to a murti, what happens is the minerals that are there in the murti also, the
Right.
panchadhatu, they also are okay, there in the charanamrit, and the charanamrit when consumed, we again are okay, supplied by the minerals and nutrients.
Right. So we have visited the Garbhagriha. We have spent some time in the mandapa. We have
Yes.
stood below the bell, which is ringing, or we ring the bell. And then we've taken the Charanamrit. What next?
Yeah, after taking this thing, then we have to pay attention to two important aspects. One is the inner pradakshina and outer pradakshina.
Right.
So pradakshina, because again, so along with all this, if you are not doing pradakshina to the temple, then your temple visit is incomplete. Why? Because this is a major aspect.
Right.
Why? Because while doing inner pradakshina, generally we do around the garbhagriha,
Right.
and then when you are doing outer pradakshina, we do to a whole aspect of temple like garbhagriha. And generally, before talking about this outer pradakshina and this inner pradakshina, let us make this clear. Basically, there are two kinds of temples majorly seen. There are many, but then majorly
Right.
seen in India are the Shiva temples and Vishnu temples.
Right.
So every Shiva temple and Vishnu and Shiva, both of them have their vahanas. Shiva has Nandi and Vishnu has Garuda. So
Right.
before their garbhagrihas, at a little distance, you find their Vahana mandapa. It is
Right.
Nandi mandapa and Garuda mandapa. So whenever you are doing pradakshina, externally, you have to make sure that you are also covering these mandapas, Nandi mandapa and Garuda mandapa,
Mm-hmm.
along with the parivara devatas also. For example, if it is Vishnu, you have Bhudevi, Sridevi, Vishwaksena, Garuda, etc. And if
Right.
it is Shiva, you have Kartikeya, Ganesha, Parvati, etc. So
Right.
all these parivara devatas has to be covered in the external pradakshina. When it comes
Right.
to internal pradakshina, it is only to garbhagriha, and garbhagriha external walls, you just have to observe they are not much intricately as the internal walls are not much intricately as the external walls of the temple.
Right.
So why should we do pradakshina? Because pradakshina itself is a kind of a classroom, a class, a lecture, or an education. It's like Wikipedia, I call. Why
Right.
is it Wikipedia? Because when you come out of, after doing the pradakshina of garbhagriha, when you come out of the temple and you are doing the main outer pradakshina, you
Mm-hmm.
find lot of sculpture on the temple walls.
Right.
And then when we are going along with the family around the in the pradakshina patha, what do we see is we see the sculpture, some we know, some we do not know. And
Mm-hmm.
then our kids, when they come to us and ask, father, like, what is this the Rama who is shooting the volley, and
Mm-hmm.
is that Shugriva who is nearby? So such kind of the questioning, cross questioning. So
Mm-hmm.
while doing this, what are we doing is we are discussing our itihasas. We are
Right.
discussing, because temple walls are decorated with the itihasas, Puranas, and
Mm-hmm.
all these stories and episodes. So when you
Right.
are going around, you are discussing those itihasas, those Puranas,
Mm-hmm.
and a kind of information and the message that is there behind them.
I call them the open air history written, which is out there, and which to somebody who doesn't know anything about the stories may not be able to interpret, but anybody who knows even a bit about the story will be able to see the whole story even in a single scene.
No doubt, like I have very good examples. Even in my village, the illiterate people who cannot read, write the books, okay, they knew volumes and volumes of stories about itihasas, Puranas. They can better say the story of Ramayana and Mahabharata than me.
Right.
So, and they can also better identify the temple walls and the sculpture that is there. Why? Because they have been visiting the temples, and they were understanding the episodes that are said.
And more than that, they understand the wisdom behind it. And
Yes.
because, and let's not forget, these are the people who created those stories on the walls.
Yes, exactly, no doubt. Uh, and then most of the stories that we observe on the temple walls, they are generally the good versus the bad.
Right.
So So, for example, when you go around the Chola temple, Chola Shiva temples, you find all the swarupas of the Shiva, like a Triprantaka Murti, Kalantaka Murti. So, such kind of. So, every episode, like a god is fighting the evil. So,
Right.
so they say if it is evil, there is end to that evil one day, no doubt.
Right. And it is also a reminder of the fact that when things go bad, the gods will step in.
Yeah, exactly, exactly, and that is what creates belief in us towards the god.
Right, right. So it also tells you that if you are going through a bad time, the gods will step in to help you at some point in
Yes.
time.
Yes, and that is the reason. Okay, out of all these aspects, taking a pradakshina in the outer external okay space of the temple is very much needed. We should not neglect this aspect at all, because this is a kind of education to us.
And a very important point you make is that this is how young children learn it, so they visit the temples with their elders, with their parents, grandparents, and because children are naturally curious, they will ask questions, and that's where they get grounded in these very stories which carry the wisdom of our ancient civilization.
Yes, the beauty you understand here, ma'am. Like for example, I take example of Hazara Rama temple of Hampi,
Right.
or for that for say any other temple also. You have this base of the temple. In base of the temple you find animals like lion, like simha, ashwa, horse,
Right.
and elephant, gaja, and makara, crocodile, all these
Right.
animals in the base,
Right.
the base of the temple. So all these elements animals have got a different representation. Makara represents the water,
Right.
and then the gaja represents the strength, and then
Right.
simha represents the power and sovereignty, and
Right.
ashwa represents the trade and prosperity of the kingdom. So when you say this, like a kid asks, so
Right.
what is this? Then the father explains, this is a simha, this is ashwa. Then he may
Right.
ask, then why are the simhas and ashwas on the temple wall? Because
Mm-hmm.
the curiosity. Then
Right.
father has to explain, the reason is this. So from the childhood onwards, when you are visiting a temple, you are said what actually they represent and what they stand for, or generally it is actually the essence of life actually. Like we say, dharma, artha, kama, mokshas, isn't it?
Right.
Nothing is less and nothing is more, all the four we have to have.
Right. So, yeah. So we have. So after we've done the pradakshina, what are we supposed to do?
Yes, ma'am. And see, in between, after production and all these elements, one thing I would like to mention, which is very important.
Mm-hmm.
See, understanding the Mula Murti itself,
Right.
like visiting.
Mm-hmm.
Generally, what do we do is, we go to temple, and most of us, even we are not like exception. What do we
Mm-hmm.
do is, let us say there is this Mahishasura Mardini Murti.
Right.
So she is with 10 hands, and then she has got 10 ayudas in her okay hands, and
Right.
she is standing killing Mahishasura.
Right.
Now when you see killing Mahishasura, it is obviously the message is clear that she is killing the evil. But then
Right.
next she has got lot of information, even our ancestors and stapadis and these sculptures, so they
Mm-hmm.
have uh, recorded the information that they want to convey us. What is that? For example, Mahishasura Mardini is standing with a churi, we call dagger,
Right.
and she is standing with the axe, she is standing with a bowl, she is stand.
Right.
So all these elements that are there, so what we have to do is, first of all we have to understand what actually they represent. For
Right.
example, if you don't understand, for example, I said axe, what does
Mm-hmm.
axe represents? Axe represent, it is called as parashu.
Right.
So what does it represent? It represents that we have to cut the worldly attachments.
Right.
And then the churi, which is very sharp, it says
Right.
your focus has to be very sharp.
Right.
So every ayuda or accoutrement that is there with the goddess Mahishasura Mardini has a meaning. So
Right.
if you are visiting deity even 100 times and you are not knowing their meanings, then that will not change your life. But
Right.
then when will that change life? When you do, when you know the meaning of what parashu and churi, axe and a dagger is. What is that?
Right.
To cut the worldly attachment. Okay, you should not be so much emotional towards the relations that are there in the world. and then have to be focused. These two elements, when you know their meaning, whenever you are saying Mahishasura Mardini, you are saying this to yourself.
Right.
Be focused. Do not get emotional through the worldly relations and attachments. So when you are saying this again and again whenever you are visiting Mahishasura Mardini, is
Mhm.
a kind of hypnotism to yourself.
This is like reading a self help book repeatedly, which keeps telling you things you probably know, but you need constant reminders to remind you of those things. But that brings me to another question, Ramakrishna ji. You have studied this, so you understand the meaning of a parashu or a or a trishul or all the ayudhas that our deities carry. But most of us have no grounding in it, especially those of us who grew up in North India. We really have zero grounding into these aspects. In fact, I remember I was once at a museum where there were some photography students trying to photograph sculptures, stone sculptures, and they could not even identify Vishnu and Shiva. Forget about the other deities, which are not so easy to identify. So, where do we go to, how do we understand these iconographies or these stories? There is not much of literature available, and I would not really depend on the internet sources because, uh, you have to take them with a pinch of salt. So, how do we, can you tell us a couple of sources where we can get authentic information about this?
Yes, ma'am. First, two aspects here again. One is we maybe from our childhood onwards, what we have
Mhm.
done is we have neglected the beautiful stories that were said by our grandparents.
Right,
We were into different other things, but we have not paid to attention those beautiful stories like Panchatantras or Shiva Purana, Vishnu Purana,
right,
because
right.
we have maybe you must have spent your childhood by watching those Vishnu Purana, Shiva Purana in Doordarshan. But then nowadays people do not, and because of this they are not aware of the episodes or the aspects that are there in the temple. That
Right.
is one stories. Next thing is the archaka who is in the temple.
Mm-hmm.
It is his duty to at least conduct a small a kind of lecture, maybe
Right.
5 minutes or 10 minutes, or gather some 10-15 people and explain what actually it means. So now what has happened, the duty of archaka has become only to recite Vedic mantras and say nothing.
You're very right, actually. I think I have seen this only at a temple in Bhet Dwarka. And the main temple in Bhet Dwarka, they have this, periodically, I think every half an hour or every 10-20 minutes, based on the crowd that is, they make everybody sit down. They give a little rice in everybody's hand because rice is what uh, Sudama gave to Krishna. uh, and they tell the whole story, and then they say that you offer Krishna this one grain of rice and your house will also get filled with all the prosperity, just like Sudama's house. So I found that a very, very interesting, and I saw everybody who visited the temple attending that talk and feeling far more enriched, rather than just visiting the temple and not understanding what the temple stands for. But anywhere else, I have not really seen.
See what a beautiful practice it is. In a
Right,
sense, while doing that, you have saved hundreds and thousands of people, and they will never forget that aspect in their life.
right, right. So I think this is a very good idea that you have floated, and I hope some temple authorities will take it up. That at least during the day when people come mornings, evenings, they have one storytelling session in the temple.
Yes, and that is the reason Archaka is equally respected, because
Yes,
he has to disseminate whatever, because he is more close to God. He is with the God. He understands all elements of the God. Now his duty is disseminate that information to us.
right, right. In fact, I now I go and sit with them, and I kind of coax them into telling me all those stories, and after a while they do tell me, but most people most people are actually scared of them. They don't go and ask them. And so I hope some people, I would like to tell people that go and ask, they oblige. it's their duty to oblige you. So, okay, so coming back to this, we have done Pradakshina, and we've absorbed some of the stories, or at least remembered some of the stories that we know. After that, what should we do?
Yeah, like I was saying, because in continuation to what you asked earlier, also let me complete that, and we'll go
Sure,
ahead
sure.
now. So basically, in India, there are Shiva temples and Vishnu temples, as I said earlier.
Right,
So if we have to understand Shiva temples and Vishnu temples, because when it is a Shiva temple, all the aspects related to Shiva are present.
right,
If it is Vishnu temples, all the aspects related to Vishnu are present.
right,
So generally, you want to understand them better, you need not do anything, you need not get into big books, okay, read
right.
agama shastras or something like that. Simple children books, we have this panchatantras, or chitrakathas of children books which are there, which are Shiva Purana and Vishnu. See, by some 10-15 pages Shiva Purana and Vishnu Purana, and just read and understand what are the episodes that are there.
Right.
And this is what I do. I did, ma'am. If you don't believe, I have this Dreamland Publications colorful books. I bought them, I purchased them, and I read them. So when I read, I understood that almost I was clear of most of the elements. What is
Right.
Triparantaka? Then
Right.
what is this Vamana Avatara?
Right.
What is Varaha Avatara? What happens actually? What is Varaha? When does he
Right.
come? So when you knows
Right.
what happens in Varaha, like he is rescuing Bhudevi from Hiranyaksha, the
Right.
sculpture that is there, you don't need anybody to explain that to you,
Right. Right.
because you already know the episode. You can interpret everything that is there.
Right. Yeah. So, but once somebody needs to tell me that, or the once I need to know. So what happens is that now you and I probably know that these stories exist, or every sculpture comes from a story and nothing comes randomly. But
Yes,
most people need to know that these stories exist.
exactly. That is true.
Right,
Yeah.
and then once you know, then finding the source these days is easier. You just have to go to the internet, and basics you will get. Coming back to the temple, uh, couple of small questions. Can you talk about the jagati, the plinth on which the temple is built? Things like stairs, the sopan marg, a couple of these elements that we may not be aware of.
Yeah. Uh, Ma'am, observe these terminologies. They're very interesting. For example, we say Jagati.
Mm-hmm.
So that word Jagati itself is very interesting, right? Jagati comes from the word Jagat,
Right.
which means the world.
Mm-hmm.
And above this Jagati, above this world, exists a temple, which is the house of the god.
Very interesting.
So in the sense, he is above this world. That is what is the message that we have to understand from this.
Right.
And then again, always this Jagati, in the sense, the platform, the highest platform that is there, is to be accessed by the staircase.
Right.
Now we have to understand this staircase is called as Sofana Marga.
Right.
Sofana Marga, in the sense, the way to heaven.
Right.
So why is it way to heaven? Because you are going above this Jagat to see somebody who is above this world, who is God. And the house of God is Swarga.
Right.
Heaven. Why? Because that is where you have some peace. That is where you have some happiness. You are free of all negative and ill thoughts.
Right.
And
And
then
it also is a way of detaching yourself from your own little world.
Yes.
And getting out of that frame of mind, and spending some quiet moments with something beyond you.
Yes, true. And that is what Jagati and Sofana Marga are. And once you get onto this Jagati, then you have a temple, and
Right.
the structure of the temple is also very interesting. When you are at the entrance, you have a small mandapa,
Right.
which is little narrow. But when you go little ahead, then you have little bigger one.
Right.
And then next the bigger mandapa, and then the Garbhagriha and Shikara are much bigger than what we have seen earlier.
Right.
So this representation, in the sense, what is happening is the chart is what do you say? The arrow is going up and up.
Mm-hmm.
In the sense, when we have entered the temple after crossing the Sofana Marga, the desire to seek God or seek the God was little.
Right.
And as you keep moving towards the Garbhagriha, that desire, okay, the ichha in you is increasing to attain God more and more.
Hmm.
and it is it in its okay like maximum when you are before the Garbhagriha.
Right.
So that the shape of the temple going from a low to the high itself is a representation of how okay that curiosity towards the god or attain the god increases in us. That is the representation.
Right. So we've spoken about how to visit the temple. Now I'll wrap it up by asking you a simple question: when should you visit the temple? One is daily basis, on a occasional basis, on festivals. Is there a structure that one should follow?
Yes, ma'am. Wonderful question. Wonderful question. No, actually, I was thinking before our conversation to say this first, but then
Okay.
you have asked me at last. So, see, generally, we have seen it is a normal practice that people visit temples early in the morning.
Right. Which is your
Early in the
neighborhood temple?
any neighborhood temple which is nearby, maybe some 200 meters or 500 meters.
Right.
So generally this has been a common practice, and especially, and see, while visiting this temple, what do? We wake up very early, and
Right.
generally that waking up in the early is called as Brahma Muhurta.
Right.
So by doing that, what are you doing? And then you take all your refreshing, etc., nature calls and all that. You bathe yourself, and you are ready to go to a temple.
Right.
So all these activities, and then immediately after that, you are going to a temple and you are chanting Vedic mantras, or you are reading something, or you are meditating. So all
Right.
this, what is it doing is it is purifying it is purifying your body,
Right.
it is purifying your mind, okay,
Right.
and it is also keeping you physically healthy because you are getting up in the Brahma Muhurta.
Yeah. So for people who do not know, Brahma Muhurta is about 1.5 hour before the sunrise.
Sunrise, yes. And
Right?
and important beauty of this Brahma Muhurta is in that Brahma Muhurta, when you wake up, you have to visit a temple. You are saying to yourself again and again to see the god.
Yes, and practically speaking, if I see a lot of Devi temples, and a lot of them are situated on a hill close to you. So if you visit those temples, you have taken care of your morning walk, your morning jog, your hiking, trekking, and then you have taken care of your 5-10 minutes of meditations per day. You soaked in the sun, which is becoming a big problem these days with vitamin D deficiency. So if you follow this ritual, you have actually taken care of all your health, all kinds of health, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, all kinds of health by just doing this.
And that is the reason they say, like, visiting early mornings of a temple is more healthier and people stay long. And
Right.
this is what is the secret.
So this is daily. And now beyond daily.
Beyond daily, like this, because I will say you an example first. My father is an agriculturist. He's a farmer.
Right.
So what does he do is we have this Kartik called as Margashira.
Right.
So what does he do is so whenever there is Margashira, he believes, because I am saying what happens in my home.
Right.
So what we used to do is we used to celebrate it as a festival.
So Margashira Nakshatra, you are saying?
Margashira Nakshatra. Yes, Margashira Nakshatra. Generally, what happens is Margashira Kartik, that happens in the just before arrival of the monsoon and finishing the summer.
Right.
So when this happens, what do we? So father says at least 7 feet land gets cooled up, and the time it is time for the monsoon to come. So
right.
we take a small murti to the field, we keep it there, we keep flowers, etc., and we also keep some prasadam in the home. We visit nearby temple, offer there a kind of puja and festival that happens.
Right.
And soon after this, what my father does is he gets ready, making his field ready to sow.
Right.
So in the sense, visiting occasionally in festivals now and then is actually remembering a natural calendar.
Right. Following a natural calendar. Right.
Natural calendar. You need not train somebody. This is what, and that is the reason Toli Ekadasi. So when is Toli Ekadasi celebrated? Toli Ekadasi is celebrated in a leisure time after sowing.
Right.
So by then monsoons have arrived. There was 1 or 2 rains. And when the rains are done, now you are celebrating happily, giving thanks to the god Satyanarayana or any other god.
That's interesting because that's why the local calendars differ a little bit across the country because they follow their natural cycle.
Natural cycle, especially with related to the nature.
Right, right.
Way because the monsoons that are in Kerala, Karnataka are not same that in the northeast, Odisha and West Bengal, etc.
Right, right.
So
Absolutely.
their celebrations differ from their celebrations.
Right, right. Just
And,
like food.
and and visiting temples and celebrating festivals and offering thanks to the god, etc., is obviously fine, following a natural calendar that has been from generations immemorial.
Right. Great.
And agricultural class is the best class wherein you can observe such practices and we can learn from them.
Right. Great, Ramakrishna ji. This was a great conversation. I have a lot of other questions for you, but we'll probably request you to come back and speak about specifically about South Indian temples, North Indian temples. But for today, thank you so much for taking out time to, share your knowledge about the temples. And I hope some people will follow this routine and they will start visiting temples little more little more intimately than they were earlier doing this. So thank you so much for this.
I would request everybody to do so because that is the way we can preserve our heritage.
We will. We will.
Yes. Thanks a lot,
We
ma'am.
have.
Thanks a lot for asking the questions and for this great opportunity. Okay.
Thank
My
you.
pranams to you.
Namaste. Namaste.
Namaste, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on Detours. You can also join us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Our handle is IndiTales, INDITALES. See you soon.